Hi, my name is Mary Gordon McFall. I was one of IPCNY's remote artists in residence last year for Give Me Space, New Prints Summer 2020. I live in Manhattan, Kansas, which is where I also made the work here for my home studio. I often tell people my practice is centered around play, both in how my observations of my surroundings filter into my work and also in my process, how I operate in the studio with my materials, and how that leans into more of an impulsive call and response direction. For my remote residency with IPCNY, I created a series of prints centered around the nostalgia of play. I'm interested in how certain games and playthings can anchor us to feelings of home and well-being, even in the midst of chaos. I used monotype and prontoplate lithography printmaking processes. Inside the prints, shapes bend, stack, and balance to form these imaginary structures that kind of float on a page and are surrounded by this hazy vignette. The idea for my project developed around March of last year in 2020. I was living in Athens, Georgia at the time, finishing up my MFA at the University of Georgia, and then moved back to Kansas to be closer to family and my now husband, Taylor. And around that time, everything was beginning to shut down. The streets were very empty and quiet, and there are a few playgrounds around where I live that were starting to be fenced off with this orange security fencing. And one of the days around that time, I was at my parents' house looking through old photographs and stumbled across 3 photos that were in an album of when my mom taught kindergarten in Germany back in the early 90s when we lived there. And inside the photographs, children are laughing and playing and gripping the edge of a parachute and running in a circle, or throwing a beanbag through a hula hoop, and kind of like field day scenes. These scenes were the exact opposite of what was happening at the time. So I wanted to take these vastly different moments and images and combine them into this series of prints. My mom's photographs were a starting point. I wanted to incorporate them in a way that wasn't super literal, but still took pieces of them to then build onto with monotype processes with shapes of color. I visited playgrounds around my neighborhood and made sketches of their forms and colors for inspiration. Even before this time and throughout grad school, had been interested in playgrounds as sculptural elements. If you look at all the different pieces of equipment, they each invite this different call to action, whether it's to run or swing, or jump or yell or listen. They are meant to help kids learn how to cooperate with others. And this serious play that happens is a universal concept that was being stifled around the beginning of the pandemic. So with some of the prints, structures point back kind of literally to the equipment, but I find the most exciting thing and also challenge is to respond to layers on the page as I'm printing them. It's like I'm putting a puzzle together in real time. As for my process, to start, I would select certain areas of these old photos in Photoshop and print them onto polyester plates. And then when I printed them through the press, inked them up and printed them, I would kind of plan for the monotype layers using tracing paper and then roll out ink, scrape away the shapes, and then print on top of the litho layer. It was a goal and challenge to merge the photographic elements with monotype, sometimes blurring the line between the two. And then using both processes together allowed for a certain kind of physicality that I was really drawn to, that also kind of reminded me of the old photographs I had seen and added to this sense of nostalgia. The remote residency with IPCNY came at a pivotal moment in my art path. I graduated with my MFA from the University of Georgia in May, and then was transitioning to like a home studio here in Manhattan And even though the residency was remote, IPCNY provided a significant platform to share my work and my process with others. Through the residency, I was able to connect with artists around the world through the virtual New Prints exhibition and the artists to meet and greet through Zoom. These kinds of meetups might not have been possible otherwise. In an overarching way, my residency continued to challenge me as an artist, striving to sustain a studio practice, and gave me the momentum to keep making work in a focused way during this strange season. How did COVID-19 affect my residency experience? Well, it affected my imagery in some ways because what I was seeing on the streets filtered into my mind and then into what I wanted to create. And then when everything closed down for a bit last year and people were asked to stay home, I was fortunate to be able to have that time for making work for the residency, which was a positive. And it affected my experience on a mental level too, which I'm sure a lot of people have experienced. It's not always easy to create when the news is so bad. And I started to question whether what I was making was relevant or important. But over and over again, when I look at other artists' work and I'm moved in a way that I can't quite describe, I'm reminded that it is important to keep making, to push through hard and confusing times. So thank you so much, IPCNY, for providing life-changing opportunities for artists all over the world. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in.